Hey everybody, my name is Kenneth. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. There's a bunch of electronic devices up here. Let me start off by saying I am not your delegate. I'm the alternate delegate.
Well,
So Rachel is your delegate, if y'all who know Rachel. It is a pleasure to be here. I got myself a little coffee, and just in case the meeting is a little dry or something, I don't want to fall asleep. But my sobriety date is June 2nd of the year 2000, and my home group is the Inside Out group in Wilmington, North Carolina. We meet every Saturday at 6 o'clock, and I can say without fear of contradiction, it is the absolute best AA meeting you will ever attend at 6 o'clock on a Saturday in Wilmington, because it's the only one scheduled. So what I'm going to try to do is, I guess, tell my story and tell you a little bit about what I was like and what happened and what I'm like today, and hopefully maybe convey a message of hope and try to encourage you guys in your own recovery. When I reflect on my own recovery, it's such an amazing thing. It's such a miracle that I want to share that, and I want that for other people. And that's one of the great things I found in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've heard it said, and I've said it many times myself, if no one's ever, I don't know how you guys are on language, if no one's ever pissed you off in an AA meeting, you're not going to enough meetings. I know I've had a couple different home groups over the years, and I've had some really annoying people. We were talking about doing service stuff, and I was telling that tonight they're having the intergroup board elections in Wilmington, and I've spent some time over there, seen some wild, crazy character defects come out of myself, and every home group I've had 4 home groups, but 2 of them were like for a couple months, and I had one for about a year, and then I had one for 7 years, and then I had one for about 6 months, and now I've been in the same one now for about 8 years. But I've never had a home group, but there wasn't at least one person who absolutely drove me up the wall. And the thing about that is, this is the thing that's awesome about Alcoholics Anonymous, the most annoying person I've ever met in Alcoholics Anonymous, I sincerely wish them well, and I really, really want them to stay sober. Like, I want that for them, because the gift of sobriety is that wonderful. Even people that I don't personally enjoy the company of, if I know they're an alcoholic, I want that for them. And I feel a love for them. And before I got sober, I'd heard people talk about, you don't have to like everybody, but it's good to love them. And I thought, well, that's a cute little turn of phrase, but it's, a bunch of BS, really. It's not. Like, I really sincerely feel that today. And that's that's so different from the way my world was before. But that's the miracle of it, and that's why I feel like I'm blessed anytime I get to speak in a meeting with Alcoholics Anonymous. And I guess, I didn't fully qualify yet. I do have a sponsor. His name is Tom, last initial R. He lives in Wilmington. And he's actually the 3rd sponsor I got, but I got him when I was 3 or 4 months sober, and we've been together ever since. And almost every Wednesday for the past 15 years, we've had lunch together. And now we have a couple other guys. There's a couple of newcomers, the new guys who have only been coming to lunch with us for about 6 or 8 years. And they come too. So usually on a typical Wednesday, there's anywhere between 3 to 5 of us. Same restaurant, I never had anything like that before I got sober. That's one of the great miracles of this program. So give you a little bit about my background. I was born in Randolph County, not too terribly far from here. Randolph County Hospital, 1974, which is also when the zoo opened there. There's a joke there. I'm sure you'll have to make it up for yourself. But when I was 7, when we moved to Wilmington, my parents had divorced. My mom had remarried. And Even before that, I'd had problems. I think I really started having problems by the time I got to kindergarten. Once I hit school, it was just rough for me. And I've heard so many people talk about, not feeling good enough, not fitting in, not, whatever. That's very much my thing. I don't have a really good reason for that. I did. I've had LASIK surgery now, but for most of my life I had big Coke bottle glasses. Although I didn't get glasses until I was in second grade, so when I was in kindergarten I couldn't see what was going on. And I was diagnosed with all kinds of learning disabilities, and I ended up spending a lot of time going and seeing different specialists and stuff. And when we first got to Wilmington, when I was in second grade, like 3 different times in the first few months I was there, I got my hearing checked. And of course, you're a kid, you don't know what's going on. I'm like, well, at this school, they just check your hearing a whole lot, And I found out later it's because my teacher thought I was hearing impaired, because she would call me and she would be standing just a few feet away and she would say, Kenneth? And I would just be, and she's like, well, he must just be deaf. And I don't know, I was in my own little world. And still somewhere there's a report card that I know my mom kept for years. I think it's in some of my stuff in my house now, but actually says on it from second grade, and it's just where the grade's supposed to be, it's blank, and then the teacher's comments, it just says, due to Kenneth's emotional problems, I think it best not to assign him grades at this time. So I was just having a hard time fitting in, and I was like, I would get in trouble. I would do things like I would show up for school, and they would say, "Where's your project?" And I would say, "What project?" And they say, "The project that everybody's been working on for the past 6 weeks." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I had no idea. Literally, I just somehow had a hard time with it, and had a hard time with other kids. And I remember jumping forward when I was in 7th grade. I first saw the movie Pink Floyd, The Wall. If any of y'all have seen that, there's a scene in there where he's in school, and it's just like the school is just like a maze. For anybody's not seen the movie, it's just like a maze, and kids are just being forced to march around, and there's just a schoolmaster sitting there just going, "Wrong, do it again," and they end up on conveyor belts with and they get these masks put on them, and they're sitting at these desks, and they're going through these conveyor belts, and at the end of the video, you see the conveyor belts are all just going off the end of this conveyor belt into a meat grinder, and I remember I saw that, and I was like, wow, someone understands. That's what it's like having to go to school. That's exactly what it's like. So all of which to say, I was the LD kid growing up, and that was just something I wore myself. And it's one thing because I've been to so many AMEs and heard speakers, and everyone's got to read. I was on the wrong side of the tracks, or I was, I don't know, poor, or a minority of some description. So I am left-handed. But my thing is, it's I didn't have, I'm a heterosexual WASP male. I don't have any, sort of outward minority status, but I felt like I was the only one. I was outnumbered by all of you. You all were in cahoots with each other, and you all understood what was going on, and you weren't telling me. And the world was just sort of going on and doing its thing without my consent. And it just enraged me, and I would get in trouble for stuff that didn't make sense to me, and I would just, God, I needed a drink. That's really what it came down to. God, I needed a drink. And so when I was 13, I finally got 12 or 13. It's the summer I turned 13. I'm not sure when the summer was, but I remember a friend of mine had come to town. As a guy, we'd been friends in elementary school, went to the same church, and then he had moved to Raleigh, but we'd go to summer camp together and stay at each other's houses over the summer and stuff, but he had gone to visit his grandparents up in the mountains, and they had some moonshine, and he had stolen this moonshine from his grandparents, and I remember it was in a Sundrop bottle, and it was almost a full bottle, and it's one thing, because I got in trouble all the time as a kid, but I really, I hated, to me being in trouble was the worst thing ever. I was constantly afraid I was going to be in trouble for something and not know why or where it was coming from. But certainly I knew that, drinking's not something you're supposed to do. And I'd heard, my dad drinks a lot. He's still drinking. My dad's probably drinking right now, to be honest. He's retired. He lives in Florida. But he's, he drank. Even before he retired, he drank every day. Now he really drinks every day. But I had heard people say that he was an alcoholic. His second wife, the last time I ever saw her, I was visiting them, and I think at the time they were living in Lexington, North Carolina, and she said, a lot of us think your father has a drinking problem, and they were organizing an intervention on him. And she said, I don't know if you'll be here when this happens or not, but this is what we're working on and stuff. And next thing I heard, she went out of town on a business trip, and he moved out of the house unilaterally without telling her, and she was calling my older sister trying to find out where he had gone to. And I must say, too, my mother's father had gotten sober in Alcoholics Anonymous in 1952 or something like that in Roanoke, Virginia. He was one of the old timers in Roanoke, Virginia. And my mother's mother finally drank herself. And they stayed married the whole time. She finally drank herself to death in the mid-'80s. So there was a good 30 years of dad's going to AA meetings and mom's drunk all the time. So I'd heard all this stuff. So I'd heard discussion of alcoholism. I'd heard it was bad. I'd heard it was a disease that ran in families. So I had some fairly specific warnings. So I thought, it's probably not a good idea. So my friend, the first night he was staying with us, he drank a little of it, and he was talking about how it made him feel and stuff, and I was like, man, but then he was making fun of me and calling me names and stuff for my timidity about partaking of that. And so the next morning I got up and I was like, I'm not going to let him make fun of me again. I'm going to go. So I went, and it's as soon as my parents left, because it's the summer, kids are at home, parents have to go to work. As soon as my parents left for work, I went and took a swig out of that bottle. And I think it was real moonshine. I mean, it tasted like death. It just burned. It was horrible. But then I went in the living room, and I had a ColecoVision. If any of y'all, it's like the knockoff version of an Atari. We were playing Donkey Kong, and I was just like, "This is amazing!" And at first he didn't believe that. He's like, "You didn't drink that. You're scared to drink that." I'm like, "No, really, I drank some." And but once that feeling came over me, it was just so wonderful. I was like, "I'm going to drink some more." And so I went back there. Next thing, a little while later, he went and checked on his bottle, and it was almost gone. And so now he's mad at me for drinking all of his liquor. And and I've heard people talk about late stage chronic alcoholics. They get to the point you're drinking 9 o'clock in the morning. Some of you, if you've read the Bible, the story of Pentecost. Every year when that comes around the church, I don't want to get too churchy on you, but if you don't know, there's a story in the Bible where the story of Pentecost, where Jesus is left and the disciples, the Holy Spirit descends upon them, and they start speaking in tongues, and everybody thinks they're drunk, and St. Peter says, "These men are not drunk, for it is only 9 o'clock in the morning." What does that have to do with anything? The first time I ever got drunk, it was 9 o'clock in the morning. And I puked all over the place, and I think I took my clothes off and was running around the house and just fell down the stairs. I mean, it was just like all the rest of my drinking. I mean, just from the get-go, that's the way it went. My friend got really upset with me. He had to clean up after me because I had puked. For some reason, I needed to puke, and he had 2 bathrooms. Instead of going in the regular bathroom, I ran to my parents' bedroom to go to the master bath. And so then he had to clean. I mean, it was just boy, I couldn't wait to do it again. And again, I know some people have this experience of slowly progressing in their alcoholism. Where it starts off as social drinks, and I think I came out the chute. Just like I said, I think from a young age I was craving. I needed something to alter my consciousness to make life bearable, and when I found alcohol, that just seemed to do the trick. Again, I've heard people talk about getting so bad off in their alcoholism they would drink NyQuil or vanilla extract or just anything they could find that alcohol in it. Again, that was my 9th grade year. We were going to visit that same friend. We're up in Raleigh. We're going to the Rialto. They had a little theater there. They showed the Rocky Horror Picture Show at midnight. And so we're going out, and it was like you could walk there from his house. And I remember we went to the grocery store, and we bought these big bottles of generic off-brand vanilla extract. And we're hiding in the bushes, and it's like downtown Raleigh. So the bushes is like, something about the size of this. We're like hiding in the bushes, chugging this stuff. That was my, that moment in Bill's story he says, I had arrived. That was my I had arrived. So like, wow, we're going to see a Rocky Horror Picture Show, and we're drinking vanilla extract, standing in this bush. But I thought that was so cool. And it made me feel right with the world. And I'd have to get through the school week most of the time without that. And it was so terrible. Although sometimes I would just go ahead, I would go buy, I called it Rose's Green Tea. There was a Rose's near my house, and they had this generic version of NyQuil. It was like 40% alcohol or whatever. And I'd go buy that stuff, about a 20-ounce bottle. And I discovered that if I would hyperventilate first, like I would just breathe in and out real fast until I was really, really lightheaded. And if I did that, I could actually chug the whole 20-ounce bottle without vomiting, because your body doesn't want that stuff. Like it wants to, eject it as soon as it starts going down. So again, I call that drinking for effect. There was no attempt at ambiance or anything else. And the thing was with the vanilla extract, it was legal to buy it. Like I would go and find products that contained alcohol that I could buy legally as like a middle school student. So when I got to 10th grade, started hanging out with people, and I had all my friends were always older. And found a guy who would buy us liquor. We thought this guy was so cool. We called him Magic Sam. He lived in downtown Wilmington, down in the historic district. And he would buy us liquor. And so we thought he was cool. And we called him Magic Sam because he was really into like hallucinogens and stuff. And we never I did dabble in that later, but at the time it was just, he would just buy liquor for us, and so we'd go hang out with him. And, looking back on it now, it's like, this guy was like 30 years old, lived with his mom, and he's buying liquor for high school kids so he has somebody to hang out with. So maybe he wasn't that cool. But, when you're like 15, you don't really have any perspective. So, long story short, and I always end up telling the story. First I'm going to tell the story, then I'll tell you why I tell the story. So, basically I ended up at a party at this guy's house one night, and I lost my virginity to some, 30-year-old woman there on the front porch with a whole bunch of people around, and a friend of mine had to get a cab. It's one of those things, the encounter didn't end in the usual way. The encounter ended with me vomiting, because anytime I was drinking, that's what happened. And that kind of ends, that kills the mood right there. I don't know what kind of mood you can get on somebody's porch, it's like, other people saw, and there was, we got home, we had to get a cab. I remember the cabbie on the way home, the cab driver was like yelling, like, "You better not puke in my cab, he better not puke." And my friend gets us home, and we get out of the cab, and I'm like rolling around dry heaving in the bushes, and the beautiful preppy girl who was a year older than me, who lived right next door, and who was my ride to school every day. For some reason, we got home at like 1:30 in the morning. She's standing in her front yard. Like, I don't know what she was doing. She was just standing in her front yard. So then my friend's telling her the story of what happened and all this stuff. And then, this is the 80s. They're constant talking about AIDS and HIV and just, I was just terrified. I was sure that I was going to get, I was going to have AIDS and I was going to die and I was going to be publicly humiliated, and that was it. That was the end of it. And again, I don't want to get too churchy. I'm Episcopalian. If you even know Episcopalian, it's not a real fire and brimstone denomination. But I was in church that Sunday. I was still hung. That was Friday night. Sunday morning, I was still hungover, and I was sitting in church just like, I'm going to hell. I'm going to hell. I know I'm going to hell. And then Monday came, and I'm sitting with my little, dorky friends in the cafeteria, and this skinhead comes by. Shaved head, leather jacket and stuff. He's like, "Dude, you guys, you won't believe what Ken did Friday night." And I'm like, oh my God, he was there. And so he's telling me, he's like, "Oh man, his thing's going to fall off. It's bad. You wouldn't believe the woman that he was with." And da da da. And so then they start telling people, And, again, in hindsight, like, probably 10 people at my school, I don't know, but I was convinced the entire school knew, and I was just full of shame. And of course, I was a 15-year-old boy, and no one wants their first sexual experience to be negative, much less shame-filled. But that was one of those things, like, I was going to take that to my grave. In fact, my best friend who was with me at the time, like I said, that doesn't count. I'm still a virgin. If anyone asks, 15-year-old boys don't tell them I'm still a virgin. It was that bad. In fact, I even ended up skipping school, and I got my mom to drop me off at school, like 70. I'd found out, like, there one day a week, the health department had an STD clinic, and I walked down the street from the school and, like, called a cab, and I get in the cab, and I told him where I was going. He's like, "Oh, are they doing flu shots?" And I was like, I don't know. I don't know anything about flu shots. He's like, "Oh, well, I need a flu shot. I don't get a flu. Do you get a flu?" I'm like, I don't know. So we get there, and it's like, "Well, I'm coming in. I'm getting a flu shot." I'm like, "Oh, my God." And it's like, you go in, it's like, it's STD clinic day. And so I did get a clean bill of health. But, so that's the story. And it's a pretty humorous story. But here's the thing. And I did speak here one time before. I didn't get to tell my whole story. I did get to tell that story. So I remember Tom coming up to me afterwards, and he's like, "Wow, that's terrible. I've never heard anyone say they didn't drink or have sex for 2 years." But that was what happened after that. I didn't drink or have sex again until after I finished high school. I was so full of shame. And everyone I knew, I swore to secrecy. Everybody who I knew that had happened. And again, I look at it back then, like, this is a grown woman, like, having sex with a drunk 15-year-old. Like, I don't know what her deal was. But the first time I ever told my story, I had no idea that was going. I truly was not. I'd said that in my fifth step, but I didn't cause that's kind of it's a pretty in-depth thing to be speaking in front of a whole group of people. But I ended up it just kind of came out, and it was the reaction I got tonight. Everybody started laughing, and then I started laughing, and then I started hamming it up, and you wouldn't believe. And then I talked about the cab driver, and the shame and humiliation, and it's changed my past. Literally, the most humiliating, shameful thing that happened to me in high school is now a guaranteed laugh line when I tell my story. How does that happen? This is the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know how that happens. That does not make sense. But that's been my experience. And for years, I've been milking that story for laughs. And after years of it being the most humiliating thing that ever happened to me. Page 124 in the book, it says that in God's hands, I'm going to paraphrase, but it says, in God's hands, our darkest past becomes our greatest assets. I have found that to be true. And that's one of those things. When I first heard that, it says in there, that the worst parts of our past are things that we can use to help others. That with that knowledge of ourselves, we can actually avert suffering and death for others. That's crazy talk. I remember coming here saying, wow. The first time I ever heard that to me, I'm like, you people are nuts. Okay, AA might be somewhat beneficial. It might be a nice place to hang out. But come on. No, really, that's my experience. That has actually proven to be true for me. So anyway, I'll fast forward a little bit. I gave you some time. So that was the first time I quit drinking. Swore off for it. And I knew I was an alcoholic. Didn't drink again until I got to college. College freshman year, I'm moving in. But the guy who's going to be my roommate showed up, and he's like, "Hey man, I got a fake ID. I'm going to go to the gas station and buy some beer. You want something?" I was like, "Oh yeah." And without a second thought, I hadn't had a drink in 2 years at that point. And without a second thought, I just reached and of course my parents had dropped me off, and they left me with some cash. And so I handed them $50. And he's like, "Well, good God, what do you want?" And I was like, "I don't know, just get as much as you can." And so, and I used to wonder, when I was in college, first my nickname was Crazy Ken. And people's like, hey, crazy! And I'm like, oh, hey! You know, they'd yell at me across campus, and after a while, they actually dropped the Ken, and then people would actually address me as crazy, and they'd be like, hey, crazy! And I'd go, and I was like, how did I get the appellation of Crazy Ken? Like, well, because when everybody was moving in, like the first day of school, like at 5 o'clock, you know, by the time 5 o'clock rolled around, I was already like had puked all over the bathroom, and like people's parents are still like moving them into their dorm rooms and stuff, and like I was like passed out on the floor of the bathroom. It's like people have to come in and like step over me. Like, oh yeah, I guess maybe that's why they thought I was so crazy. I don't know. I'm sure I did plenty more after that would help confirm that opinion. But so then was drinking a whole lot. Ended up the summer to my third and fourth year of college. I was at Guilford College in Greensboro, and I'll tell you too, I was a physics major because I had this chip in my shoulder. I'd always been the LD kid, so I had to be. And I was in second grade. Said you have a learning disability in spelling, handwriting, and math. So I was a physics major and I double majored in math, and just so like I'll show those people. And I managed to graduate in 4 years. I got C's and D's the whole way. Barely, I graduated like 320th out of 340 or something like that. But I graduated with a double major in math and physics. But right before my senior year, I'd gotten my first DWI. And I was like, that's it. I knew it. I knew I can't drink successfully. I'm an alcoholic. And you have to go and do that assessment. And I just walked into the assessment and basically said, yeah, I know I'm an alcoholic. I shouldn't be drinking. I knew. It's like I got busted. I was like, I'd gotten away with it for 3 years. I'm skipping over a whole lot of shenanigans and some wrecked cars and damaged relationships and things. But, so they told me I had to go to treatment for 4 hours a day, 5 days a week for 6 weeks. And but I quit drinking. And my whole senior year, my whole last year of college, I did not drink. And I always like to share this. For me, this is absolutely not an outside issue. I became a raging pothead because I thought that was the way to cure my alcoholism. And I would tell people, I would be at parties smoking weed and taking pills, but it's like I was like, I'm an alcoholic, therefore I'm going to have to manage things very carefully. And I thought the right combination of pot and pills would keep my alcoholism at bay. So that time, even though I stopped drinking, I wasn't exactly sober. We have a little saying in my sponsor family, you can't be high and sober at the same time. So I was not sober, but I didn't drink that last year. And I did just, the place where I was going, I had to do all this treatment, like had to get there early every day to blow in a breathalyzer. I was fine. I was smoking weed. And so I said, because I thought I had invented this. I've now found a lot of alcoholics have tried to use other substances to substitute or supplement, as the term my sponsor uses for it. But I'm the type of alcoholic, I can't use any mind-altering substance successfully. For me, it's just another version of alcohol. My brain interprets it as just a new kind of alcohol. And of course, I ended up going back to the alcohol. But the other stuff didn't go away. I thought, well, I'll start drinking again, but I ended up doing both. So that was the second time I'd sworn off alcohol. And then I finished college and did some other things and was just a complete maniac living up in Greensboro. I'd gotten to the point that I never drank in bars and stuff like that. It was too expensive. I like to drink 40s. There was a place in Greensboro I found that, and of course this is in the 90s, but you could buy a 40 of Magnum, which is like the worst. Like St. Ives was my good stuff, so I had money. But you get a 40 of Magnum for $1.25, which means 4 of them is $5. And I discovered that's less than one drink at the bars that my friends were going to. And I'm like, you guys are nuts. And I would go to the gas station with a backpack and a Walkman. At that time I had a Discman. And I'd have my Discman and 4 40s in a backpack. And I knew a little place, it was by Guilford campus, but I knew a place I could park and just walk out in the woods. And not only be maybe 100 yards out in the woods, but I was in a place where no one would ever find me. and had my own little tree there that I would hang out with, and I had my headphones, and the woods, the world is my urinal, and I'd have cigarettes, and what else did I need? I mean, that was it. I was good. That was the kind of drinking I did. But finally it got to the point that I had to, I was starting to drink at work, and I knew that something bad was going to happen with that. And I was really starting to scare myself. And pretty much everyone who knew me, and it's one of those things, even the people I used to go drinking with were pulling away because they were scared of the way I drank. Finally, in Thanksgiving of '99, I went to see my dad and his side of the family. And at this point, when I'd gone and done all this treatment stuff after my DWI, I'd publicly announced I was an alcoholic and sort of made this big confession about it. And so I was officially not drinking, though I'd been, a raging alcoholic. But I was hiding it from my family, which means I basically had to not spend time with my family. And so I'm there sitting with my dad, and it was the night before Thanksgiving, and he was just drinking openly in front of me, and I was like, I can't believe it. He knows I'm an alcoholic, and he's drinking right. That is so disrespectful. And, of course, I had, taken some other stuff on the way down there. And so as soon as he went to bed, he had this big bottle of vodka, one of those plastic half-gallon handles. And I just remember tilting that back and just chugging it. And the next thing I remember, and I used to call it my time machine, because I used to just it would be a different time. I was just moving through time, So I came to, I remember chugging that, and I came to, and my dad was sitting at the foot of my bed, and I'm like, and it's 7 o'clock, and I'm like, why is my dad sitting here at 7 in the morning at the foot of my bed? And he's like, Kenneth, we're really worried about you. And I'm like, oh my God. And I had with my housemates and my friends in Greensboro and stuff, I'd had so many conversations like that. This is the first time with my dad. And of course, he drinks every day, but he's worried about me. I come to find out, well, for one thing, I realized that, because it's 7 o'clock, it's barely light outside, and I thought it was so weird that he was in my room, sitting on the foot of my bed. Come to find out, it's the sun didn't come up. It was getting darker, and it was 7 at night, I'd missed Thanksgiving. And found out the night before, I had stumbled around the house and woke up my sister, and then she woke up other people, and then apparently she got me on the phone with my mom and stepdad, so my dad and his wife were there, I don't know why they didn't take me to the hospital, really, because and God only knows how much I drank, but I'd taken some other stuff that I was drinking enough to pass out, but the other stuff, I kept popping back up, and he kept saying, I know you took something, because he's an experienced drinker. It's I know you took something else, because you kept passing out, and then you popped back up, and you wouldn't stay down. And so they shipped me off to rehab. I resigned my job that I had in Greensboro. And I gave them notice and everything. It's I'm moving. Didn't tell them I was going to rehab. But I went to a 20-day rehab program, and through a confluence of events I want to get into now. I was looking for a spiritual solution, and I managed to. I spent a month in rehab, and I spent a month in India at a spiritual pilgrim center there, which was a neat experience. And I didn't drink while I was out. I wasn't in recovery the way I understand recovery now, but I was dry at the time, and I was fresh out of rehab. And it was I think a powerful experience. I spent a lot of time praying and asking God to make me be sober. And I spent some time like that. And when I got back, I moved back to Wilmington, because I knew how to get away from Greensboro. And and I prayed a lot for God to get me sober, and I also prayed for God to help me get my life together, because I had never had a real career. I had a degree, bachelor's degree, double major in math and physics, and I was working as a tech at a group home for handicapped kids, which is part of the reason why I was so I'm just grateful that nothing ever happened where there were times where there were emergencies at the house and I had to really do stuff, and there were times when I was drinking and sneaking around and not doing my job. And it's purely the grace of God that those two times never overlapped. Because when I think back about now, it could have been bad. So I was in Wilmington, and I started going to meetings, and I joined the young people's group there. That was my first home group I ever had. And they met, it's not the young people's group that's there now. It's a group that met at 9:30 Mondays and Fridays. No, Tuesdays and Fridays. And I would just go on Fridays, so I figure, during the work week, I should be out looking for a job. I need to get a job, And, that heard people talk about that. I had some awareness. There were other meetings around town and stuff. I was like, hey, I've got a home group, blah, blah. And I asked this guy to be my sponsor. And he's like, well, I'm a full-time student right now, and I've got a job. And it's like, I'd love to help you, but I don't know if I have enough time to really give to you that, if I can really give you enough time that you need as a newcomer. I was like, oh, don't worry, I got this, because I'm smart. I thought I was the smartest guy in the room, really. And I'd gone to India, had this great spiritual pilgrimage under my belt, and I had this great, degree in faith. And literally, not that I was grandiose or egotistical or anything, but in the 12 and 12 it talks about the intellectually self-sufficient man or woman. My physics thesis at Guilford was entitled "On God and the Laws of Physics," and I was trying to explain these grand unified theories and how So I thought I know way more than any of these other people know. I don't know how people put up with me when I was a newcomer. But there's this girl pulled me aside one night when I was coming out of my home group. And she said, Ken, I'm not trying to tell you how to live your life or how to work your program, but I see you're doing everything necessary to relapse, and I feel like I should say something to you. And I was deeply, deeply offended. I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, you hardly ever go to meetings. I'm like, I'm coming out of my home group right now. She's like, yeah, but you're not, you should be going to a meeting every week. Every day, really. And I'm like, well, I come here every week. She's like, we weren't here last week. And I'm like, okay, I missed 1 week, and you're acting like I'm about to walk straight into a bar. And she's like, yeah, you should be going to meetings every week. You're not working with a sponsor. And I'm like, what? It's like, I've got a sponsor. He's right over there, because he's on the far side of the parking lot. And she's like, look, I know who your sponsor is, and I know you never call him. And I'm like, oh, I have called him twice. And I thought I had it, and she just laid it out you're not doing this, you're not doing, and God, what a bitch, Within 2 weeks of that night, I was drunk. It's the most amazing thing. It's almost like she could see it. It's one of these things that, and so, I ended up drinking for a week. One week I was out there, drank every single day. I'd gone to visit my grandmother in Castle Hayne, in the house where I now live. And I was going down to Myrtle Beach to go to a spiritual retreat center for the weekend, because I'm so spiritual. Wow, look at me. Drinking 40s in the car on the way down to Myrtle Beach, doing all this sound. If anyone else ever done this, you think you got something, you're holding it down here, and you kind of wait until you're on the highway and there's no other cars in sight, and you go, blah, 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 blah. And on my way to a spiritual retreat center for the weekend. And I don't remember getting to Myrtle Beach, but apparently I did. Months later, the people at that retreat center sent me my suitcase. So apparently I had gotten there at some point. I woke up, that was a Friday afternoon. Saturday evening, I woke up and I'm lying, somewhere, and I can't really move. And all of a sudden I was like, I start looking around, and this little voice goes, don't move, you're going to mess up the scan. And I'm like, I'm being scanned. And apparently, and again, looking at the police records and the hospital records and stuff, I was on Highway 17, North Myrtle Beach, and just swerved, driving at highway speeds, whatever that means, just swerved in oncoming traffic. Hit two people going the other way. Have no memory of it, and it's only by the grace of God that no one died in that accident. My leg was mangled real bad. What they call the tibial plateau, the top of my shin bone was just exploded in pieces. My hip was fractured, and I had a concussion and some minor cuts and scrapes all over me. But they had to get the jaws of life and stuff to get me out of the car. People I hit were treated and released at the scene. They walked away. Purely by the grace of God. Now, again, I don't know any of the detail. I was in a blackout. I don't remember anything about it. But, I've done everything necessary. For what I have done, I've done everything necessary to either be dead or spend the rest of my life in prison for vehicular homicide. I've done everything necessary. It's just God decided that wasn't going to be my story. But I came to, that was Saturday night, I found out. And then Sunday, because I needed orthopedic surgery to get my bones put back together. So it wasn't just broken, it was exploded. And they have an orthopedic center in Wilmington. And I'm from Wilmington, and they're ready to get ready. So they put me in an ambulance, sent me to Wilmington. Found out later, I was in trouble with the local sheriff because I was supposed to be under arrest, and they got me for fleeing the jurisdiction. But so that was neither here. That was years later when I was trying to get my license back and stuff. I found out that there was all this other stuff that I got myself in more trouble. But I didn't know what was going on. But I was in the hospital. I was in the hospital for a couple days before my mom showed up. And she came in. Well, she didn't come. She stood in the doorway, and she gave me what I call an Al-Anon speech. It's one thing I'd been around, and I'd heard about it anyway. I knew what this was. It was obviously a rehearsed speech, and she said, I've done everything I know to do with you. It's been thousands of dollars sending me off to rehab after my previous, 6 weeks of treatment. And bailed me out of jail a couple times, and bought me several different cars. And I look back on it now because both her parents were alcoholics, and then her first husband, my father, was an alcoholic. And she doesn't drink. She's never been interested in drinking. And I know that for her, the worst thing that could possibly happen would be for her little boy to end up being an alcoholic. And that's exactly what happened. And this is months after they'd sent me to rehab. What she thought, well, he finally got it now. This is years after the time when I called her up and told her, Mom, I figured it out. I'm an alcoholic. And she said, oh, thank God he finally realized. So I'm just going to smoke pot instead. And, but it's just so many ups and downs and ups and downs. And I remember I started saying, I'm sorry. I know I've hurt you. And she's like, she had the wherewithal to say, look, don't tell me you're sorry. Sorry doesn't mean shit. You want to tell me something that means something, tell me you haven't had a drink in 5 years. That would mean something. I know you're sorry. And what am I supposed to do? I'm in a hospital gown. I don't even have a back pocket, much less to kind of reach back and pull out 5 years sobriety. But at that point, and I didn't really think, it's like I felt like I was defeated. And I was like, I know, even when I know better, I can't stop drinking. Even when I stop drinking, I don't stay stopped. Even when I've gone to rehab and done treatment and everything else, I can't stay sober. And then I remembered that girl, calling me out, and I was like, well, they're going to blame me. It's my fault. I didn't do everything. I didn't take all the suggestions. I didn't do everything they said I was supposed to do. And so I decided right there, I'm going to do everything that these people suggest. Everything you guys tell me to do, I was going to do. And I still didn't truly believe that it would work for me. But I figured at least that way, next time I got drunk, it wouldn't be my fault, it would be your fault. Because I would have done everything you told me to do. And, I haven't had a drink since. And I did a lot. I had a day off work today, and I went to my old home group. So there's a guy there who got sober in 1965 up in Cleveland. And he can tell you how to trace back his sponsorship family back to Dr. Bob. I call him Absolute Jack because he always talked about the four absolutes. He's the only person I've known who ever did. He's picking on. He's like, man, you guys should have seen this guy. And he came in because he remembered. He's like, I had my leg was just nasty. I had to do all this surgery, and I've got a bunch of hardware and screws and stuff. And it's like carpentry work, really, the way they describe it. And I was on crutches, and then I was on a walker, and then I had a cane. It was 6 months before I could walk unaided. And, you guys loved me. And gave me rides. That's one of the amazing things. And I think about this, look back on that. Like, if you've ever seen somebody who's new, who's like been sober a couple months, and like they think they have everything figured out, and they always want to share it at the meetings and like tell you how to do it, and they haven't been sober long enough to know who the old timers are. So like they end up like giving feedback to somebody who's 20 years sober about what they need to do to stay sober, and and like everything they say, it's like just jittery, crazy, pressured speech that and like interrupting themselves. That's the way my sponsor used to describe it. He said, "Ken, you start to say something, and then you interrupt yourself with another thought, and then you interrupt yourself with that thought." I was a crazy person. Like, that's me. Like, I was one of the worst newcomers I can imagine. And not only would you guys let me come to your meetings, you'd pick me up and give me a ride so I could come to your meeting and talk on my head like a crazy person. And one thing I always say, one of the things I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is that love is real. It really is. And Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't have a copyright on love, but I learned it here first. I saw it here first. I found out it was real for the first time in Alcoholics Anonymous. And really I had two guys came and 12-stepped me when I was still all mangled. I couldn't get out of my apartment. Didn't have a car the first 3.5 years I was sober. These guys came and I was on a second floor apartment and I couldn't get in and out because I had hardware and stuff all over my leg. And I called the intergroup, and these two guys came out in 12-step, and they would sit in my apartment. My smelly, nasty apartment. I had my ashtray. At that time, I was a chain smoker. My ashtray was a shoebox I'd lined with aluminum foil, and it would just fill up and fill up and fill up. And again, and not to be too gross, but to be a little gross, I peed in one of those little hospital urinal things. They'd come by my house, and I was like, "Hey, could you go dump this in the toilet for me?" And they would. And I'm not saying you need to do that when you 12-step someone, but that's what these guys did. It was and I couldn't really shower properly. Like once a week, I would like go lie on the bathroom floor and try to rub my, do a little spine. It was nasty. And they came for a couple months. They started a little men's big book study on Wednesday nights in my apartment. When I started getting out and going to meetings, I met Tom, my sponsor, and he would give me a ride every Sunday night. We go up to Rocky Point with his sponsor's home group. We'd stop by a halfway house on the way there to see if anybody. I was like, "That's great. This guy's awesome. He's helping these poor guys at the halfway house because they need help." None of those guys were on crutches. I was on crutches. I thought they needed help. Tuesday and Thursday we had High Noon, which is his home group, which eventually became my home group for about 7 years. And Wednesdays we'd have lunch with his sponsor. His sponsor now can't get out that much, but we've continued the tradition, and now we've got other guys who come with us. And it's Friday and Saturday. Friday and Saturday was time to spend with his wife. I could call him if I needed to, but a lot of people spend a lot. They talk about calling the sponsor. I didn't call him that much because 5 days a week we were doing something together. And that's the thing and my sponsor, he's this old Irish Catholic guy from New Jersey. He's fairly laid back, but he doesn't talk about emotions and love and stuff and use flowery language a whole lot. But he showed me love. I've heard people, time is love. If you want to give someone love, give them your time. He gave me a lot of time. And he was a perfect sponsor for me because I was so crazy. If anyone had tried to give me direction, and some people like these Nazi sponsors, and I've heard people share about that, and like if that's what you need, go out and get it because it's out there. You can find somebody who will boss you around if that's what you feel you need. I was constantly like, by this point, I was like, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to work these steps. And I'd become a sponsor like, well, in the big book it says this, but in the 12 and 12 it says this, and I think this corresponds to what Aristotle had to say about blah, blah. And over and over and over again, he'd say, like, well, back in New Jersey when I was getting sober, when I was working this step, what I did was, I heard that a lot. He would tell me his experience over and over, and he's extremely non-directive, and that worked for me. Because the only thing he did, occasionally he would pull me back. But particularly, I'm going to say, with the 9th step. He kept pulling me back to 8th step. And he said, you need to pray for willingness. You really need to pray for this and become entirely willing, entirely ready. I don't have time to tell all the stories on that, but that was, many of my men's I know came out much, much better because he got me to take the time and just not figure them out, which is what I was always trying to do, but pray on them and wait for guidance. And that helped me immensely. I guess I'm out of time. But I always have to put a plug in for doing service. You mentioned service. If getting involved in service is the amazing thing for me about AA is like I've come to find out that there really is good in the world. Like you guys are doing something good, and God is in charge, and we're going somewhere. And the most fundamental reality that I have today is that we're all in this together. Whereas before, when I was drinking, drinking would alter my consciousness to make life bearable, but it made it bearable by shutting down my consciousness. That's what I needed, thought that I needed to make life bearable. Because I knew on the most fundamental level that I'm alone, we're all alone, no one really cares about anyone else. Life sucks and then you die. And that's it. And you die alone. And today, even if I'm having a crash, and I've had some stressful, difficult days in recovery, but no matter how bad my day gets, I know that I'm walking through it with you guys and with my higher power. And and we're all in this together. And it's going to be okay because God's in charge. And I don't know how I got to that reality that I was in before to the reality that I am now, but I thank you guys for it. Thank you.